In 1993, Sherri Herrera, a mother of 4, was 30 years old. She lived in Tulare County in California. She was a known sex worker and had problems with drug addiction. However, she put her life in danger every day. In order to support her kids, she often worked by the highway rest areas. It was March 30th, 1993, when Sherri's body was found about 400 miles from Tulare off of I-10, near an eastbound on-ramp to the 10 freeway near Desert Center in Riverside County, California. Her last seen moments were her being dropped off at a rest stop between Tiller and Pixley. According to a witness, she planned to be picked up 10 minutes later, but she was never seen alive again. Sherri's cause of death was strangulation with a belt, and she'd also been sexually assaulted. Somehow she traveled, or had been moved over 400 miles from her hometown, with no explanation. DNA evidence was found among the items, however, stumped by the huge distance. With a lack of DNA technology and no suspects, the case went unsolved though. Local investigators at the time were unable to identify a suspect. Using the crime scene artifacts, they handled the case with care by properly packaging evidence and caring for it. As the years passed and technology progressed, in 2002, investigator Mike Thompson of the Riverside County District Attorney's Office and a former member of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department Cold Case Unit alongside Texas Ranger Danny Briley worked together on the case. They decided to upload the DNA found to the database known as CODIS, and about 5 years later, a match was made. Although a match was made to DNA codes, no name or identity was associated with the DNA sequence. The match was made in question with another case of a murdered prostitute named Shenda Hayes. Shenda Hayes was a woman who was found murdered and assaulted in April of 1992 in Titus County, Texas. Shenda Hayes was also working as an escort and had been strangled with the cord by what police call, quote, a device made of wire and cord in a manner to control the victim. It was believed that she was also sexually assaulted. Her body was then callously left by a rest area along Interstate 30 near Mount Pleasant in Titus County. While investigators now had a DNA match to 2 crime scenes, they still had no name to go along with that DNA sequence. In September of 2020, the Riverside Cold Case Unit began conducting forensic genealogy inquests into both the deaths of Sherri Herrera and the connected death of Shenda Hayes. The Texas Rangers had previously processed the evidence and derived and created a file based on a single nucleotide. This type of file is then able to be uploaded to public genealogical company databases, which process the results. The results are then compared to results sourced by DNA kits purchased by the general public, such as kits from 23andMe and Ancestry.com. Thompson said that according to his investigatory notes, which he calls a, quote, family tree, there were 6 relatives who lived in or around Waco, Texas, who were in the right genetic range. For a more direct comparison, a saliva swab was taken from the mouth of the narrowed-down suspect on April 26, 2022, and the DNA profile matched from both evidence taken from the crime scene of Sherri's death and from the crime scene of the murder and careless dumping of Shenda Hayes. Finally, in May of 2000, 22 retired truck driver Douglas Thomas was arrested in Waco, Texas for the murder of Shenda Hayes and is being held on a $2 million bond. In June, Thompson reached out to a lead investigator in that case with a positive DNA match. Forensic genealogy was used to connect the DNA of Thomas to the crime scene of Sherri Herrera as well. In June of 2022, Thomas was charged with the murder of Sherri Herrera. Once the trial in Texas is complete, he will be brought to California to be prosecuted for her murder. Thomas had been driving cross-country for 4 decades, so investigators warned that his body count may be higher than we know, as the interstate routes are notoriously dangerous places for women to be. Without their own transportation or protection, numerous bodies of women Likely escorts or unhoused people are found every year along the interstate routes, and due to the anonymous nature of the countless truck, drivers and commuters traveling in and out of the area, very few cases are ever closed. In January of 2011, Bethany and Decker, 21, was struggling to come into adulthood. A native of Fredericksburg, Virginia, she had moved to the Washington area as a result of her marriage to Emil Decker. Together, the couple had a son, but her husband's frequent deployment to Afghanistan, often of indeterminate or agonizingly long durations, severely strained the marriage. Bethany became pregnant again near the end of 2010. She was struggling to stay faithful to an absent husband, and she eventually moved into her own apartment in Ashburn, Virginia, when she was 4 months along in her pregnancy. She left her son at her in-laws in Maryland and worked at a restaurant. She finished her coursework at George Mason University and was expected to graduate in May of 2011. While working at the restaurant, she had met Ronald, rolled in around 30 at the time, and became romantically involved with him. He soon moved into her new apartment and established himself as a controlling and possessive partner. He would regularly demand that Bethany send photos of herself from her cell phone so he could be sure she was not with anyone with whom he did not want her to associate. Bethany's parents had developed a plan to get her out of her situation, but they were never able to implement it. On January 29, 2011, she called the restaurant that she was working at from her apartment to check her schedule. This would be the last time that anyone heard from Bethany. Both her husband and Rolled In claimed to have seen Bethany that day, but neither of the men's claims could be independently verified when Bethany was not at the airport to see her husband off when he returned to Afghanistan. Their friends assumed that the couple's marital problems had simply gotten worse over time. Their concerns became more urgent when, over the next few weeks, messages sent through Bethany's personal Facebook page, purportedly from Bethany herself, alarmed friends as they were not in the tone or written voice of Bethany. It would be revealed that her friends were in fact messaging with the killer himself, masquerading as the slain Bethany. In late February, 3 weeks after anyone who knew Bethany, besides her husband and boyfriend, unreliable sources at the time, friends and family, were alarmed enough to begin looking for her. Her grandparents drove by her apartment and noticed that her car was parked at an unusual angle and had a flat tire and was covered in dust. Bethany usually kept her car in far better shape, and this visual was so unlike her that they finally decided to report her missing. The investigation caused Bethany's husband to come back from Afghanistan early, and he cooperated fully with police. Rolled In moved out of their shared apartment and told police that he merely thought Bethany had gone back to her husband, but he told different investigators different stories in regards to when he had last seen Bethany or her car, which was parked outside. It then turned out that he had an arrest history for minor offenses, including smashing a window. I searched the apartment and of the fields nearby, failed to turn up anything which could support an arrest warrant, so Rolled In was free to go and soon stopped cooperating with investigators. He was named a person of interest, but no concrete evidence was able to lead to an arrest. Rolled would remain in Northern Virginia until a subsequent girlfriend would try to escape his wrath by moving away to Pinehurst, North Carolina. Rolled would follow her there to continue his abuse. One night they got into an argument, which escalated to a physical struggle, during which Rolled menacingly informed her that he could, quote, make people disappear. He even fired a gun at his girlfriend, but she was able to jerk away from him, and after the bullet damaged her eye, and while she lost sight in one eye, police say that was a far better outcome than the bullet. Taking her life, police arrested Rolled In and charged him with attempted murder. His ex-girlfriend would later go on the American television talk show Dr. Phil to tell her heroine story. Rolled in was serving time for this assault, while investigators continued looking into Bethany's death, a problem with the evidence recovered led prosecutors to drop the more serious charge of attempted murder in exchange for a guilty plea of 2 counts of assault. Prosecutors from Loudoun County had tried and failed, while he was awaiting trial, to get him to tell them anything about what had happened to Bethany, but Rolled in invoked his Fifth Amendment rights and told police nothing, and investigators announced that he would be deported to Bolivia when he was released, as their hands were tied without further evidence. Because of the lack of evidence in Bethany's disappearance and the lack of a body of her found, while there was little doubt that Roldan was responsible for her disappearance, police wondered if there would ever be enough evidence to charge him, even though he more or less admitted that he had killed before to his girlfriend during the gunfire, which led to his prison sentence. Many feared that after he finished his sentence on the assault, Roldan would simply be deported to his native Bolivia and no likelihood never have to face justice. Prior to Rolled In being released in 2020, Bethany's family feared that he would escape conviction, but Rolled In was arrested on charges of abduction. In Bethany's case, as soon as the sentence ended, prosecutors in Loudoun County got an indictment, although they have never disclosed what evidence they had. And almost 2 years later, Roldan has finally entered his recently of guilty. The evidence does not seem to include the recovery of Bethany's body, however, as no media reports indicate that her remains were located. Sentencing of Rolled In is scheduled for February of 2023. However, prosecutors say that his plea of guilty might shorten the trial, a relief to both friends and family of Bethany. Her case was finally solved after over a decade. On June 9, 2022, the Cold Case and Missing Persons Unit, alongside the Texas Attorney General's office, announced that yet another case had been solved due to genetic genealogy. Holly Marie Clouse, who had last been seen by her family in early 1980 and was believed to be deceased, is in fact alive and well. The woman formerly known as Baby Holly Marie was found just over 40 years after her parents were brutally murdered in rural Houston, and she was deemed missing and endangered. Dean and Tina Clouse were last photographed with their infant daughter, Holly Marie, in 1980. Shortly before all three mysteriously disappeared, Holly had not been seen since. Shortly after this photo was taken, a year later, Holly's parents, Dean and Tina, were found murdered in Houston on January 12, 1981. While the crime scene was processed, alarmingly, there was no sign of the couple's infant, a baby girl. The baby's father, Dean, was beaten to death while her mother, Tina, was strangled. Due to a lack of IDs, the couple's identification using advanced DNA techniques was delayed until 2021, assisted by agencies in 3 states. A search for records of their child, who was born Holly Marie Clouse by Texas investigators, resulted in a surprising discovery, a rarity when compared to the many missing and exploited children never recovered. Holly Marie Clouse is now a mother of 5, living in Oklahoma. Later spitting that investigators came to Holly's place of employment to make the positive identification in person on June 7th, which would have been her father Dean's 63rd birthday. Just hours after the Oklahoma mother of 5 was able to be reunited online with family from both sides in an effort to help locate Holly after her parents were finally identified. The Hope for Holly DNA project, launched in her honor, became the custodian of the genetic profiles of several of Holly's family members. Detectives believe Holly's disappearance is linked to a religious organization that some say has cult-like characteristics. 2 women identified only as religious nomadic women say that they brought Holly to the church. According to Brent Webster, an investigator with the Texas Attorney General, Cold Case and Missing Persons Unit. The detective goes on to say, quote, "They were wearing white robes and they were barefoot. They indicated the beliefs of their religion, included the separation of male and female members. That information rang some bells for Rick Allen Ross, a world-renowned expert on cults and their recruitment behaviors. Ross said that the description of the woman's dress sounded highly similar to the Christ's family. No further details have been given, although there is some talk that Holly was given up prior to the murders, as some media outlets say. She was found at church a year prior to her parents' death. However, no further details are given, as police say due to the sensitive nature of the ongoing investigation, they are not able to provide more information. Well, questions remain as to how Holly was able to go missing and remain undetected. She is alive and well. And to her remaining family, on both her mother and father's side, this is the best resolution they could have hoped for. Her missing persons case was closed after over 4 decades.